Okay, now for our final lightning talk for this section, we have James Stocks, who is going to be talking to us about DragonRuby, the little engine that could. And James is a software engineer and a hobbyist game programmer. So I'll hand you over to James. Everyone give a round of applause.
Yeah, thanks very much. I wanted to just take a lightning slot to talk about DragonRuby. I could talk about it for a lot longer than that, but I kind of thought I just want to do a PSA. This is a thing that I think is great, and let people know about it. So I'm a software engineer at Proofpoint, which has nothing to do with this. This is a hobby of mine. I'm not a maintainer or a stakeholder in DragonRuby, so this isn't a sales pitch. But at the end, I will let you know how to get a free copy today, just for you. So a short history about DragonRuby. It has three kind of main maintainers, foremost of which is a fellow called Amir Rajan. Amir was is a very productive app developer. He was developing apps for iPhone using Objective-C and getting quite a good income stream from that. But it was miserable, didn't enjoy it. Miserable to make apps in Objective-C, and then that didn't help to produce apps for anything else. You had to start over to do Android or to do desktop. So coming out of that was DragonRuby. DragonRuby is a kind of a platform or a framework for developing apps that are basically in C, so they can build anywhere, like mobile, desktop, games console, or anything else. But the actual game code is in Ruby, which is a beautiful language to work in. I'll talk a bit about the capabilities of DragonRuby, but I just want to mention that the pictures scrolling past are all DragonRuby games. Several of them are available on Steam, and one of them is Amir's game, A Dark Room, which is available on the Nintendo Switch eStore. So some of the capabilities of DragonRuby, you can build for Windows, Mac, Linux, desktop. You can do HTML5 builds that run directly on a web page like itch or your portfolio website. And you can build for Raspberry Pi. You can do all of those with a standard license, which is one-off $48. If you want to build for mobile, you can build with a Pro license. You can build for iPhone or for Android. The Pro license is like $148 a head a year. Within that Pro license, there's no API for in-app purchases or adverts, which might seem nice, but actually, if you want to make monetized apps, you want to monetize it. You can do in-app purchases with your app, or you can run adverts, but you need to do all the library calls yourself. Like, you need to build the libraries into your project and then do the library calls yourself. There's nothing actually built into the DragonRuby API. It is a 2D engine. It does strictly have some 3D, but if I was to come here and say it does 3D, then you would expect to be able to go into Blender and save out a mesh and a skeleton and UV texture coordinates, etc., and load that into the scene. And DragonRuby today just doesn't do that. It's a 2D engine, mostly. It does have beta support for HLSL shaders, which is really nice. It's 2D, but you can use shaders to do things like weather effects, fog of war, CRT, or VCR type effects on the screen. It does also have VR, and you might say, like, how have you got VR if you don't have 3D? It supports VR by allowing you to have X, Y, and Z properties on any 2D element, and then kind of render that in a pseudo 3D space where everything's billboarded. It also lets you put X, Y, and Z properties on any sound and kind of put it in 3D audio space. And it also picks up hand movements from your kind of VR controllers. Lets you do that. It does build for consoles. It does have games on Switch. It's advertised as doing Xbox and PlayStation. How it does that is all under NDA, so I don't know. It says, I've got that wrong, saying Pro license. It's not Pro license. It is something under NDA. Yeah. So, like, some of the things I think are really nice about DragonRuby. It comes packed with samples. This is kind of inspired by the Nintendo Switch SDK, which comes with an attempt at an exhaustive set of samples for anything you might want to do. So anything you might want to try and do, there will be a sample for that. One thing with the Nintendo Switch SDK is that they give you those samples and then nothing more. That's it, you're on your own. DragonRuby does have a really good community. It's one of my favorite kind of spots on the internet. It's on Discord. It's full of like makers and doers, and everyone's very friendly, wants to help. And there's like a show and tell channel. People are genuinely interested in seeing anything and everything that people are coming up with. So DragonRuby has hot reloading, which is kind of similar to hot reloading in web development, such that whenever you hit save in your editor, the changes will reflect immediately in the running instance of your game. It also has hot reloading, so you can develop against like a handheld mobile device, and as soon as you hit save in your IDE, the changes are reflected immediately on the device you're kind of targeting. It has a interactive console or a REPL, so you can like interact with the Ruby state interactively. You can use that to kind of like interrogate the state of the game, try and poke some values and see what changes they make. One of the things really nice with that is that it's how crash handling is handled in DragonRuby. So like if you cause a crash, instead of your program actually terminating, it will pop up the console with the error that occurred, and it'll give you a chance at that point to examine the Ruby state to see exactly what went wrong, and you can attempt, before fixing the code, you can attempt to fix in the Ruby state and see, is that what fixes it? Something I think, it's a small thing that I think was really nice, is that DragonRuby has mock switch builds. So before you go under an NDA to officially build Switch games, you can do what's called a mock build, which is where you take a retail handheld device like a Retroid 3, and DragonRuby will do a mock Switch build. The main thing that does that's really nice is when you release to Nintendo Switch, Nintendo make you go through what's called lot check. Lot check is their kind of release suitability process where they review the game and pass or fail it. They don't tell you what the checks they're going to do are. You have to wait a week or two, and then you get some email saying no, and you just start over. So DragonRuby has some automated tests built in to check that your game will pass lot check, that you won't just get thrown away by Nintendo. That's things like if you write text that's too small or too close to the edge of the screen, that's a fail. If you assume there's only one controller and you don't support there being 4 controllers, and the user player profile actually hopping randomly between those controllers, that's a fail. So I don't actually know what automated tests DragonRuby has for that, but it is there. And I think that's really cool that if you want to have a pathway from being a hobby bedroom programmer to having a path to release on Nintendo Switch, that's like really nice. So DragonRuby, in the API it provides in Ruby, it does also have support for tests. And 2 things that's quite nice with that is that you can, well, there's 2 ways of running the test. One is kind of, you can run it DragonRuby headless, so there's no actual window launched. And that means you can run your test code in a pipeline like GitHub Actions or GitLab CI. The other way that you can run tests is it will by default actually run all your tests whenever the game fires up, even in a build. That means that if you've got like a tester who's helping you like test your game, you can have the tests run automatically when the game starts, and you can save time on QA by just having it fail immediately if there's like anything bad in any test failing. Another nice thing in DragonRuby is it's a bit simple, but it is there, and they want to develop it as an accessibility API, which means that you can toggle accessibility on and off in the runtime in DragonRuby, and it will attempt to use like alternate inputs and outputs and alternate UI navigation for accessibility. It does have support for Apple VoiceOver out of the box. So if you're on an Apple device, it will support like reading out text labels and listening in for speech as a substitute for physical input or mouse input. A couple of points about, I'm going to have to watch the time here because I could talk for an hour about this, is why you would use Ruby, specifically for game code. Ruby's an extremely flexible language. It's very expressive. It was, when Ruby was created, they intended to add more kind of English language readable keywords into the language. which makes it's a lot easier to read. In practice, when you get into a large Ruby code base, I actually think it's more difficult to read. It can get quite complex. But one thing I think is nice on the topic of expressiveness is I think Ruby is a very natural language for when you have a train of thought. Because it's so expressive, it's quite easy to get what you're thinking out in the code. There's an example there, kind of just like, if, for example, Ruby supports question marks in function names, and as a convention, if you're writing a function that returns true or false, you can just drop a question mark on the end, and it's very readable to tell, like, this is a Boolean function that returns true or false. Ruby was also designed by its designer, I think it's called Mats, but it was designed to be multi-paradigm, which means it kind of mixes up kind of like object-orientated versus just function versus object-orientated versus just procedural, etc. So you can use it for like a large production app. You can use it for like just a utility script. It's quite nice. It also has it's also got like a garbage collector, which I think is really nice for game code, because you just want to like fire through implementing the game and not be too fussy about garbage collecting after yourself. It is really nice to have an automatic garbage collection. Ruby's also described as a very dynamic language. It has duck typing, which is to say that you can define classes. You can have strict typing in Ruby if you want, but you can also have duck typing, where you simply have a bunch of data objects with a bunch of like named functions and named member variables, and you can dynamically just say, like, if this object has these member variable names, then do this with it. That's used a lot in DragonRuby because frequently people developing in DragonRuby will just define like a structure, or in Ruby it's a hash that has all the properties for a component in the game, like the player, and you can chuck in like things like the sprite things, like the X and Y and the sprite image file path in that same data structure. Well, you can use that then to fire that to the sprite renderer code. In that same structure, you can have some of the properties for like sound effects, and throw that very same object over to the sound system. Yeah, so hopefully DragonRuby would be appealing to some people. If it sounds good, I will have a free copy available. If you go to dragonruby.jstocks.online, there will be, just for today, a free download for the standard license. And yeah, that's it. Thanks very much. You can find out about DragonRuby at dragonruby.org. You can keep in touch with me. Very happy to take questions at jstocks.online. And that's the URL only for today, dragonruby.jstocks.online. You can get a free copy of DragonRuby standard license. Thanks very much.